people need to understand that inflation is not a monetary phenomenon. You had true, when we were on a gold and silver standard, you had true supply and demand economics. So it'd go up, it'd go down, it would vary, right? That's a normal business cycle. But with this garbage, if you read what they were saying when they first put this in place, it was inflation was baked into the system, because not one man in a million understands inflation. And even Christine Lagarde, the head of the ECB, and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, admitted they do not understand inflation. So the Fed's job is not about fighting inflation because it's part of the fiat money system. It is about controlling the rate and the speed of that inflation. If you don't think that inflation is too big a problem, then you don't ask for more money. But when inflation heats up like it is now, or it has been, I mean, it hasn't gone away, no matter what they say, it's really going to get worse, especially if they start to reverse course on interest rates. But they can't, that genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
That genie is done. We're at the end. I don't care what they say. I don't care how they juggle their formulas to make it look this way or that way. Once people start seeing it in their daily lives, it's like a veil is lifted. And you can't really blame people. I mean, I've had a number of people say to me, well, I try and tell my friends and they don't listen, so they're just going to have to deal with it. Well, frankly, we're all going to have to deal with it. But what we're really asking people to do is have a major paradigm shift. Admit that since the day they were born, they have been told a lie and they have believed a lie. That is very uncomfortable for most people. We vote with our purses. We vote with our wallets. So if you're buying gold and silver, that's your vote. If you're keeping it in this garbage, I mean, there are over 4,800 currencies, fiat money currencies, that do not exist anymore. Especially after 1971, we went to a pure debt-based system. Well, you got to pay interest on that debt. And so that just accelerates the inflation. And now we're at the end. And so when you hear everybody being so confused about the market action, about the currency, what's happening in the currency markets and this and that and the other thing, it's because we're at the end. So it is confusing because things aren't working the way the system was set up to function. They're not functioning the same way. But nobody ever says, well, this must be the end of the system. Well, they can't. And they created the spot market to manage, and these are their words, they're not my words, to manage people's perception of particularly gold, because gold is the primary currency metal. And a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. And if you know, or once you know, I should say, that currency is actually going away, then you start to make different choices. And you start to take your wealth outside of the system. I mean, I'm an ex-banker. I'm an ex-stockbroker. Do you know how many stocks or bonds or mutual funds or ETFs or annuities or CDs? Do you know how much of that I have? Zero. Because I understand the language and I understand what they're doing. And I was there in the 80s as everything was really kind of kicking off and all this talk about globalization. So they needed to really trap you in it. But this is the interesting thing. Gold and silver is part of our DNA. It's part of our DNA. And yes, I agree with you. I think especially with this rapid inflation, that makes the demise of the currency more obvious to the general public. And they're starting to go, wait a minute, this is the American dream. You're supposed to, if you work hard, you can have your own home, you can raise a family, you can get educated, you can send your kids, all of this stuff, you can have the American dream. But more and more of the younger people past my generation are waking up to the fact that that American dream is always going to be out of their reach. They go to college, but what kind of income do they make after that? But they're saddled with all of this debt. Now that's going away. Of course, they have to, they got a little bit of a reprieve for a few years. That's now going away. But people are getting very discouraged and they don't believe the American dream is possible anymore. And so that's why I say, absolutely, it's inevitable that they're going to bring out the new CBDCs, the surveillance economy, because they want even more control than they have with this stuff. When they first came out with the quantitative easing, so money for free, all of this money printing, every iteration afterwards took a lot more money and they were getting a lot less result. And they have been on this quantitative easing. And even now, they call it quantitative tightening, but globally money is still extremely loose. Whenever you have interest rates that are below the real rate of inflation, that's easy money. I don't care if you had interest rates at 20%, right? If the rate of inflation is at 30%, that's still easy money. Mm-hmm. So, for them to talk about tightening is kind of garbage, but it is becoming more and more challenging for people to roll, or corporations or governments or whatever, to roll over that debt. So in some ways there's easing and some ways there's tightening. Just like, look at the Bank of Japan, right? They lost control of their yield curve control, but I've done pieces on that historically as they've been going along. So it's pretty obvious that they were losing control. But rather than making it obvious to the public, what did they do? They broadened their band. So, and this yield curve control, okay, so you print a whole bunch of money and you go in and you buy a whole bunch of bonds to control the price, and all that really does is convolute interest rates out there, the value of the money, the price of the money. I've been studying currencies and currency life cycles since 1987. And there is absolutely zero doubt in my mind, zero doubt, but that this is the end of this fiat money experiment. And what they're trying to do is transition us into the next iteration of the fiat money experience or experiment, which is really a full surveillance monetary system. And that's what makes having silver and gold in your possession so critical. So, I mean, there's no doubt.